If psychology and pop culture had a baby, they'd call it Shrink Tank.
A new paper reveals more intelligent people are quicker to learn and unlearn.
90% chance that there's some weird animal out there. Yeah.
Stern's been doing this forever and far more extreme. From Nashville and Charlotte, this is the Shrink Tank Podcast. Welcome, everybody. If you're joining us for the first time, a very special welcome to you. If you're coming back for more, thanks so much for joining us. I'm Dave Verhagen here in Nashville. We have a great show for you. Our trending topic today is the psychology of gay conversion therapy. That's in our second segment, but first we're going to meet our Charlotte panel. Dr. Emma Kate Wright is here. Hello, Emma Kate.
Hi, Dave.
Since we're going to talk about gay conversion therapy in the second segment, is there anything in psychology that you've ever experienced with clinical practice, at some treatment program, anything that you've heard of that is like the weirdest thing that you've ever heard of? Any really weird psychology practice?
Yes. Well, no, not necessarily a practice. I guess I never used to actually believe in dissociative identity disorder until I saw it. And then I was just kind of slapped in the face with it. And it was very bizarre.
Was that when you were in private practice?
Yes.
Wow.
So that was something I experienced.
And Dr. Frank Gaskell's with us. Frank, what's the weirdest thing you've ever heard about or seen as far as a practice or some kind of treatment regimen in psychology?
Well, the weirdest I've seen actually works, and I did it, which was for reactive attachment disorder.
On yourself?
And all the little tricks of sensory and regulation and the holding and all that kind of stuff. That was weird, but it really did work.
The weirdest thing I've ever seen was there was a treatment program outside of Charlotte, and they would do all this metaphorical stuff. And so they would have kids walk around with trash bags full of trash, for example, and say, "I'm trash," and things like that, and then they'd have to carry the trash bag around all day and talk about how they're trashy. And then they'd have to throw the trash bag away at the end of the day.
I'm sure there's a lot of research behind that.
They would litter? They would litter. That's not helping.
It was littering therapy. Well, you just heard Jonathan Hederley. He's our certified Asian who rounds out the panel. Jonathan, what's the weirdest thing you've ever heard of in psychology?
I don't know how weird this is. I tend to have mixed feelings about this and some off-putting feelings, but I've worked in substance abuse treatment, and I really have a hard time with like an IOP program or other forms where they can kick you out of a treatment program if you don't go to enough 12-step meetings. And to me, that just is something that when you're dealing with maybe force required treatment to where you could lose custody of your kids, you could lose your job or license, you could go to jail, the idea of going to enough 12-step meetings that are completely unregulated, I don't see the soundness of that.
Yeah. Well, each week, Jonathan trolls the internet and he finds a story of psychology in the news for our first segment that we call
Being Human.
So the question, does it matter who we help, and does it make a difference whether we choose to give money to those close to us or whether we give it to charity, has been answered by a new study. And it suggests that different types of generosity have different effects on the brain, and that one form in particular may reduce stress and anxiety. So when we help someone close to us, that is being called a targeted form of support, according to a new study out of the University of Pittsburgh. And if we give money to charity, that is being described as an untargeted form of generosity. What the study showed was targeted generosity was associated with diminished brain activity in the amygdala. So increased activation of the amygdala has been observed in anxiety, phobias, and post-traumatic stress disorder, while giving untargeted support did not correlate in any way with activity in the amygdala. So helping someone close to you has been related or connected with reducing the possibility of stress or anxiety, and thereby leading to positive health implications for the giver. So, Frank, what do you make of this?
Well, it explains how I feel when the Harris Teeter lady says, "Would you like to round up to give to blah, blah?" I'm like, no, and I don't. I mean...
Or when you go to PetSmart, that's the worst one.
That is the worst.
The PetSmart,
No.
they have little
Poor
sad dogs
puppies
at the
and
cash
kitties.
register, and they're like, "Would you like to donate $1 for homeless pets?" Like,
Would you like to be a
no.
good person or a horrible person?
But that's the thing. If I see a picture of a pet, I'm more likely to do it.
Oh.
But if somebody's like, "Hey, I want to give money to MS," I'm like, "No, I don't know. I don't
Children with
want
cancer.
to." But when I see a homeless guy and I give him a 20, or if I know somebody that I'm supporting that I have a relationship with, it's reinforcing, but it also feels like I'm doing something concrete. It's not, it's vague and I'm going to pay for an administrator, and so it makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, I'm in agreement simply because when you, for example, if you tithe to your church, maybe if you know exactly how those funds are being used, that's helpful. But if you can directly affect and impact one person and see how it changes and benefits them, then obviously that's going to feel a lot better.
Yeah, I remember giving to a really noble cause. It was like, where, my apartment burned down. Where, I've got nothing. I got no clothes. And then
Whose
GoFundMe page. And we're
apartment was
like,
that?
okay.
No idea.
I had cancer. Okay.
My apartment burned down, and I did have
gave money to
cancer.
this person, and it made me feel good.
Did you ever give $20 to a homeless man, Frank?
Every time I see a homeless guy, I give them
them
whatever money I
food.
have.
You do
Give them
not.
food.
Yeah, I do.
And I don't believe that.
I started doing it about 3 years ago, maybe 4, when Maddox asked why we don't give money. And I thought, well, it's because they're probably going to buy alcohol. And then I was like, okay, no, I need to model this. And so I do.
You give Maddox allowance to homeless men whenever you see them.
And then you give
boy.
Maddox alcohol and drugs.
Let's remember Emma Kate's GoFundMe page.
Let's bring it back here. Yeah.
Oh, man. It does make sense, though. I would never have thought this way of targeted and untargeted giving, but it makes perfect sense. It's like the untargeted stuff is like, it's a good cause, but it's in the abstract. The targeted thing is, we're going to fund Emma Kate's GoFundMe page.
Yeah. And this is a true story.
It is a true story.
It's funny, it's still active and you keep asking for money.
What? It is not so active.
Oh, you seem
It's
defensive.
go fund my wedding.
Sure,
My second
my
one.
mom and dad would probably like that. And for the record, I've never been married. Thank you very much.
No, but you planned to.
Well, that happened too. That's okay. Frank is just doing this because the last podcast he got roasted, so it's a little payback.
He got charred.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was like smoking. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you guys, this is kind of a little off the topic a little bit, but did you guys see that story of these people, this couple that raised $400,000 for the homeless guy?
Oh yeah.
And then they
that was
spent
so
it all.
Sad.
yeah, but
That
I
was
mean,
so
They were like,
sad.
we're not going to give it to him because he's going to use it for drugs. But they raised money and then they spent it, I think.
and they spent it. Unlike, the Catholic Church that spent $7 billion on lawsuits here
Right.
because of their sex scandal.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
That's a great plate being passed around every Saturday and Sunday.
There you go. Well, if you have questions or comments about this whole idea of generosity, targeted and untargeted generosity, and the effects on mood and emotion, then we'd love for you to write us at feedback@shrinktank.com. Let's go to our trending topic, which is the psychology of gay conversion therapy. The reason we're talking about this is there are at least 2 films that are either out or coming out on the topic, and they're both sort of a portrayal of a youth going through a gay conversion therapy, either at a camp or that kind of thing. Any of you have experience with a client that has experienced that directly? Has anybody known someone that has gone through a program of gay conversion therapy?
No.
I have not.
No, but I've had a lot of clients go through treatment at like a very extreme religious sort of
Yep.
program that had maybe 0 or even negative psychological merit, designing it. And then I've also had classmates, peers, and clients that either have struggled with sexual orientation or identity issues or I went to a graduate school that was a seminary, and I'm pretty sure the unspoken majority of the people that went there subscribed to reparation therapy or gay conversion therapy, even if it wasn't explicitly stated.
So kind of to lay out the dilemma or the controversy, there are practitioners of, and they call it different things, but we'll call it for just ease, gay conversion therapy, of someone that is that has same-sex attraction, and they undergo some therapy process to either reduce or eliminate that, or to shift their attraction over to more heterosexual attraction. The controversy of that is at least twofold. One is that it typically is with younger people who don't have a say in the matter because their parents are making that choice for them. The second is the efficacy of it at all, whether it works, to the point where some states have taken the position of outlawing it, saying that it's not to be practiced. So I want to get back to that second point later, but any thoughts about this sort of idea of whether it's a kid or a young adult or an adult going through a process of what we'll term gay conversion therapy? Emma Kate.
So I guess part of it, I think there is going to be a huge difference when you take into account development. So for parents to really kind of force their kids to go through this sort of process, it's going to be really damaging to their identity and to their self-esteem and their confidence. And these sorts of practices are going to stay with those kids forever and how it impacts them. So it's completely different, in my opinion, in terms of if an adult was making a conscious decision to try to change their behaviors, as opposed to a child or an adolescent who does not have a choice.
Frank?
I feel the same way. And when I hit this topic, it makes me really, really angry. And for me, it always just comes back to religion and how humans just twist religion in a way that harms people. And these kids who've gone through this process, it seems like by and large they're in these Christian communities, and it's such heavy judgment and such heavy, if you behave this way you're going to go to hell, is that's incredibly traumatizing. But to have that mentality in today's day and age, I'm dumbfounded by it. I can't even process it.
Jonathan, you had a seminary background, and any thoughts about how was this topic ever broached or addressed, or how was it thought about?
Well, I mean, at the time that I went there, it was even written in the contract for professors in the psychology department that they would not have any type of support or platform where they would endorse homosexual orientation as acceptable or compatible with Christian belief. Now, it wasn't something that they directly had to be on a soapbox and vocally oppose, but there was a lot of tension around that issue because the seminary had a graduate counseling program, but it also had theology programs for people that are wanting to be pastors or biblical scholars. And there was a huge chasm between those demographics and how they tended to view issues around sexuality. And a lot of times I would even hear how recently in a lot of people's minds, the DSM declassified homosexuality as a mental illness or a mental disorder. I think it was in the 70s.
Well, but it was barely. They changed it to like a sexual disorder.
Yeah.
But it was like 5,000 in favor of getting rid of it, 3,000 against. So it wasn't clear cut.
And so, I mean, I think in some ways it's both a testament, but then it's also a larger conversation about how much and how little maybe has changed in such a short period of time, where people would be institutionalized, maybe lobotomized, or sent off to these, in some ways, labor camps was one of the ways that, it's kind of all behavioral modification, negative reinforcement as a way to like change your sexual orientation and your sexual urges.
Yeah, that I was reading about the lobotomy thing. They would take these pins and put them through the edge of your eyeballs.
No.
Don't stop saying that.
It's true. It's true. And they would swish them back and forth to stop, to cut these neurological, because they thought they would cure, but 40% of the people this happened to were actually homosexual. And John F. Kennedy's sister, they did that to her.
No kidding.
Yep. She was institutionalized and made dramatically worse from it.
Wonder why.
Wonder why. So, Jonathan, what's your thought about the practice of this, and even beyond that, whether it should be banned or not? What's your whole take on the practice of it, and then kind of the response to the practice?
Sure. I mean, I am wholeheartedly in favor of banning it. I have not seen any substantial or even minuscule research that seems to support it and is able to address or defend against the accusations that it does more harm than good. I think historically, Orthodox Christianity has had a very real tension with mental health and science. And I've seen that even as I try to more and more speak in front of faith communities to really inform and enhance their understanding of psychology and mental health, what it is and what it is not. For some reason, there seems to be this historical suspicion that the more emotionally and psychologically sound you are, the more we're trying to have you walk away from your faith and belief in supernatural. And so I think that's kind of rooted in that. And the whole idea of tolerance or acceptance towards homosexuality as a acceptable orientation or lifestyle, I think is used as their argument of why you should be suspicious of psychology and mental health. I've had a parent come in and point blank ask me, my kid is struggling maybe with some sexual identity, and they were asking me, do you practice gay conversion therapy? And I was like, no. I was like, if the kid is struggling and they want a place to be able to talk openly about that struggle, and that if they don't want to feel these homosexual urges, I'm gonna create a safe, non-judgmental place. But if you're looking for me to steer them into one way or another, that's not what I do.
Yeah, and I can't help but think that, the science behind homosexuality is going to show up eventually. Sure, there's some research out there about prenatal hormones within the womb, where women who have successive male children, the odds of being homosexual are significantly higher if you are the youngest out of many boys. And so, I think there's probably going to be more research like that will come out that shows that there are some true biological implications for why individuals have their sexual preferences that they do. And so to try and force somebody to change their biology just seems inherently wrong.
It won't make a difference, though. The science won't make a difference.
Know.
The people that are inclined to see it this way are going to see it this way, and the people that, it won't matter. The deeper the science goes won't make an impact on this, I don't think.
Well, sure, but that's a confirmation bias, right? Where you want to seek out the information that supports what you believe. And so I believe that sort of practice is wrong. And so I'm going to look for the science that would support that, just like the people who don't believe that homosexuality is okay. They're going to try to find whatever evidence they can.
Right. So I'm with you guys in that I think it makes me sad. I feel like it's a sad practice, and it sends all the wrong messages. But here's a question I have that I have mixed feelings about. How do you feel about the state stepping in and saying you can't practice a certain thing or a certain way? Now, obviously, we happen to line up with this particular one because it not only is there no evidence to say that it works, but also, or no strong evidence or consistent evidence to say it works, but also that we feel like it does harm in the message that it sends to kids in particular. But where do you begin to draw a line of where the state is stepping in saying, nope, you can't practice this thing that we don't like, or that we have philosophical disagreements? Because to be honest, we practice with a lot of things that have, the outcomes are uncertain. So, any thoughts about that?
I think research should dictate it, but that's not gonna move the bar much, because the individuals who want to pursue conversion therapy as parents of their kids, that's irrelevant. So they could ban it, but I can't imagine them not being able to find somebody who would do it. But
Yeah,
when
because
it
they could go
comes to-
out of state. They could,
yeah, they could. It's the same with abortion. But I just, in terms of suicide rates and PTSD and all these other symptoms, it seems like a intelligent electorate could make a firm decision on that, I guess.
That's big.
Not
big
gonna
leap
happen.
there.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
Yeah.
a great conclusion there, Frank. Right?
Yeah, okay.
That's what we're
Yeah,
placing our hopes
that's
in.
it.
Yeah, an intelligent electorate.
Yeah.
Yeah,
mean-
let's not legalize marijuana, but let's make conversion therapy okay.
And I think that there's a difference in how I read things having variance in terms of their efficacy versus something that the research seems to point towards a higher level of harm and risk. And I think from an ethical standpoint, our first role and responsibility is to do no harm. And I feel like I think a strong argument, a pretty sound argument, can be made of allowing parents against their will have their children undergo gay conversion therapy. I think it really puts them in harm's way. And I'm not a big believer in everything needs to be, needs government oversight, but I think we all have these things that we champion and say, like, this is an important area where somebody needs to step in to protect minors or those that lack the power to choose their own course of action.
And that's where it seems like the argument hangs. It's where someone's powerless and this is being imposed on them, and it has the potential for some pretty deep harm. So last question, and this is also controversial. What do you make of there are people that make the claim, I went through therapy and I was homosexual and now I'm not. And what do you make of that?
I think they have been brainwashed, to be honest. I really do. I think they're stifling their true identity. And because it's one thing if, let's say, during your adolescent years, you were exploring your sexuality, and let's say your mom or dad catch you if you're a boy, making out with a dude, or a girl making out with a girl, and then they think, oh God, we're going to send him to this gay conversion. It's one thing if you weren't sure about that at that point. But again, I can't help but feel like, it's not okay. It's not okay.
Let me put it to you this way, Dave. All right.
Here we go.
You strap me in a chair and electrocute me every time I see a pretty girl, and then give me like heroin or something every time I see a guy. I'm pretty sure within about a month of that, I'll be convinced that I like dudes.
I think an hour. Why is he saying a month?
I mean, there is this, behavioral conditioning thing that you can do.
Right.
Well, and I mean, this may be controversial. I don't tend to think that it is, but the whole, sexual orientation, somebody that, versus fluidity, and it changes, like it almost feels like we're succumbing to a very extreme black or white, all or nothing type of thinking when it comes to sexual orientation and identity and urges. People that are asexual, pansexual, are there other variables that can help inform somebody's emotional and sexual and sensation-seeking sort of reception to things? And so if somebody came to me and said, like, I once had sexual or homosexual urges, and whether it was through gay conversion therapy, whether it was through traditional therapy, whether it was just sort of like over time they went away, I on the surface, I don't really have a hard time buying into that as a possibility. People can change. I think that is one of the, maybe one of the fundamental outlooks of my life and mindset is like things can change. Not everything has to fit into one of two categories.
And sexuality is very complex, and there's a lot of nuance and complexity to it. And so if someone made that claim, I don't know that I could speak to whether that's true or not true. I will tell you this. There's a lot of, and if we had time, we could detail this. There's a lot of stories of people that were on the front lines of like, I went through gay conversion therapy and now I'm straight and I'm married. And then a couple years down the road, they're caught in a gay bar or having an affair with a dude, or they run off with the guy that they started some, gay conversion ministry together with. I mean, there's tons of those stories.
Yeah, I remember those days.
Oh yeah. Yeah, those were the good old days, Frank. So, there's part of me that's like, when you have enough of those kinds of stories, you're also like, how honest with themselves is someone being if they're saying, I was genuinely homosexual, genuinely gay, and now I'm not. I don't know. It's a question. But I think where we're agreeing is that some of the practice of this therapy can be very harmful to kids, and that it's ultimately, punchline, bottom line, great for parents to communicate unconditional acceptance for their kids and love them no matter what. And if you have questions or comments, which you very well may, we'd love for you to write us at feedback@shrinktank.com. Our final segment is something that we call our doctor's orders, and these are things that we're personally enjoying in pop culture. And Frank, do you have anything for us?
I do. I am strongly recommending that if you have the money, which I did, you run to the Lego store.
Well, that is a redundant statement.
And if you can find it, you buy the Lego Hogwarts school from Harry Potter. It is truly a work of art.
$399.
And it is, I'm allowing Emma Kate to help me with it.
Yes.
Allowing. Mm-hmm.
It's actually really cool. There's a lot of intricate details that they put in there that are pretty awesome.
It's one of the best I've seen.
And it clearly has to be one of the most expensive.
Well,
right?
But I will tell you, if you can find one in the store, you go out and get it, you'll be able to sell it for 3 times its value on the internet.
All right. Jonathan.
There you go. I want to recommend a Netflix original movie that I watched with my family recently. It's called To All the Boys I've Loved Before. And that may seem like a strange recommendation for a dude to give, but it is a great film, very charming. It's based off a young adult novel, and it really centers around an Asian teen girl who, similar to writing a diary or journal, wrote letters to all of her crushes growing up, and they get out to those boys. And then you sort of see all of the dominoes fall, but it's really charming. The cast is very likable, and like a lot of great coming-of-age movies, there really isn't like an adversary or a bad person in it. It's just really about navigating that awkward time of your life. So it's called To All the Boys I've Loved Before. Check it out on Netflix.
And my recommendation is an album called Pray for the Wicked by Panic at the Disco. Some great songs on it, and it's highly recommended. Get it on iTunes, or you can stream it too. And that's it for this edition of the Shrink Tank podcast. We hope you'll check out shrinktank.com for great articles and videos. You also can find links to our Doctor's Orders products there on shrinktank.com. And follow us at Twitter at @shrink_tank, and like us on Facebook. For questions or comments, drop us a note. Our email is feedback@shrinktank.com. If you like the show, please give us a review on iTunes. It helps us build our audience, and we'd greatly appreciate it. Our producer and theme music composer is Sean Beck. Our associate producer and social media guru is Mariel Butler. For Emma Kate Wright, Jonathan Hedderly, and Frank Gaskell in Charlotte, I'm Dave Verhagen in Nashville. Please tell all your friends about us and make it a great week.